Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Can you hear me in the back? Yeah. Wonderful. Well, it's taken a little while to get this one here. Remember, we had originally scheduled this for January, and Mother Nature had other ideas. But we're very excited to have Dr. Gutek here today. Slightly modified from his original topic, but this is another great event as the commemoration of Owen-Maclure 200th keeps rolling on. I'm going to give Dr. Gutek an introduction. Have a very impressive CV. He told me, don't read the whole thing, I'll never get started. So
that's true.
And of course, when we finish up today, you'll be hearing from Diane Sanders of all the great events we have in the pipeline for our commemoration. Dr. Gerald Gutek is Professor Emeritus of Education at Loyola University, Chicago, where he served on the faculty for over 3 decades and also held leadership roles as department chair and dean. He earned his BA, MA, and PhD from the University of Illinois, specializing in the history of education. An internationally respected scholar, Dr. Gutek has written extensively on the historical and philosophical foundations of education. He is the author of numerous influential books and articles, and his work has helped shape the study of American and comparative education for generations of students and scholars. His works include Pestalozzi and Education, American Education in a Global Society, Internationalizing Teacher Education, Joseph Neef, The Americanization of Pestalozzianism, American Education 1945 to 2000, A History and Commentary, and in a series co-written with his wife Patricia, who is here with us today, Visiting Utopian Communities, A Guide to the Shakers, Moravians, and Others. Back to Pestalozzi for a second. Apparently, we've been pronouncing that wrong this whole time. Dr. Gutek's going to set it straight. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Gerald Gutek, who will speak to us today on McClure's design for American education, integrating the boatload of knowledge with Pestalozzian pedagogy.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me in the back? Okay, I want to make, because I've been to so many presentations where I couldn't hear the speaker. I want to clear one thing up at the beginning. Despite my appearance, I was not on the Boatload of Knowledge in 1826. Sometimes I feel like I might be on it. I have my daughter Laura here by my side. I have, as I entered my 9th decade, I'm getting arthritis in my fingers, and if I have trouble, she's going to help me with my pages. I used to do that when she was 2 and 3 years old with her pages. Okay, to get on the same page, I should say on the same boat, what I'm going to do is, I originally was assigned to talk about the Boatload of Knowledge in 1826. And of course, being a professor, I'm not going to do what I was assigned. I did some review of the literature, and it's been done very, very well, copiously, thoroughly, by Josephine Elliott and Donald Pitzer. And I can't better their works, and I'm not going to repeat it, but they have all 40 people who are on the Boatload of Knowledge in detailed commentary. What I'm going to do is position McClure within the history of American education, my field. Then I'm going to go to what I did here at New Harmony when I was an archivist, when I was in the archives doing research. I'm going to talk about Joseph Neef. And I call it Pestalozzianism. I think Ron is right, it's Pestalozzi. But my advisor, Archibald Anderson, always referred to him as Pestalozzi, so I acquired that pronunciation. It's the same guy, Johann Heinrich Pestalozzi, or Okay, in celebrating and reflecting on the arrival of William-Maclure and Robert Owen's Boatload of Knowledge 200 years ago at New Harmony, I'm going to be a little different, unconventional. I'm going to begin with my conclusion rather than my ending. That doesn't mean the paper is going to be shorter, though. And then I'm going to be autobiographical, telling how I joined the Boatload of Knowledge as a historian. The questions McClure and the scientists on the Boatload of Knowledge brought to New Harmony need to be asked again, as they were 200 years ago. What is knowledge? How is knowledge to be used? We live today at a time of a barrage of information on the media that claims to be, but is not necessarily true. How do we authenticate a claim to knowledge? And today we are dealing with difficulty in communication across boundaries, especially ideological ones. For McClure, knowledge was about something and was to do something. Knowledge linked production, consumption, and communication. McClure's educational plans would have taken knowledge out of the academy and put it into the community. When I sitting here looking around the beautiful room, I noticed the mural up there. That's a classical mural. It's about Greece and Rome. And I thought, boy, McClure would not have liked that mural, because that mural represents the old order that he was struggling against to get into college. And that, when McClure was struggling to present his own plan of education, you had to have attended a preparatory school and you had to know Latin. Otherwise, you weren't going to go to college. And this mural is a beautiful mural, but I don't know if William McClure and certainly Robert Owen would have appreciated it. They probably would appreciate its aesthetic taste, but not its meaning. Okay, McClure's educational plan would have taken knowledge out of the academy and put it into the community. His boatload of knowledge was anticipatory of things to come. I'm introducing, it's not my concept, but I think it's a good one. Anticipatory history seems to be a contradiction, but that's what we're going to do with McClure. He was anticipated things to come. In anticipation of the land-grant movement in higher education, that was one of his culmination, that universities should deal with in a pragmatic way what was needed to produce, to grow, to make, sell, and consume products. It was a challenge to a tradition, maybe a bit too early, but nevertheless an historical anticipation. McClure, a geologist and explorer, believed that knowledge was empirical, verifiable, replicable, and applicable. His dictum, "Knowledge is power," took knowledge out of the purely speculative, philosophical, and metaphysical realms and brought it into the world of work, making and doing things, producing and consumption. The arrival of McClure's boatload of knowledge at New Harmony in 1826 was a step in constructing his design for a system of American education. He had begun his work in Philadelphia, not his work in geology, but his work in education. And now he transferred his ambitions to New Harmony. I'm going to identify what I think were the designs in his educational plan. Recruiting a cadre of recognized scholars and educators, identifying them, people who were scholars and scientists, bringing them to a particular place. That place, of course, was going to be New Harmony. Among his scientific recruits were the natural scientists Thomas Say, Gerard Troost, and Charles Le Sueur. Then the second point in his, or element, is making that location, once he had these people here, turning that location into a research center. We would call it a think tank today. He anticipated the think tank. It would be a laboratory and a library repository for scientific knowledge. And importantly, it would have a press. There's a school press that turned out a lot of important works to publish books and articles. A archive and library to record and disseminate scientific and educational knowledge to wider audience. And we're seated in that place today. With the scientists at the research center, the third component in McClure's design was education. So we got the knowledgeable people, putting them in a place, and then designing a system of education so their ideas and their works can be transcribed, translated, and transfused. To establish schools where students learn naturally and scientifically, McClure's Pestalozzian educators, Joseph Neef, Ficapol D'Erasmo, and Marie Duclos Fratasia, were to establish schools with a curriculum that incorporated the findings and the methods of the natural sciences. That was the plan. Scientists discover, teachers implement, so the students can benefit from those discoveries. Although there was a very strong Pestalozzian presence at New Harmony, Johann Heinrich Pestalozzi was not there. He's the missing man. He wasn't on the boat. He didn't come to New Harmony. He didn't come to the United States. But they refer to this in the history of education as a center of Pestalozzian education. So, I've got a topic for my research for 40 years, okay? Now, Pestalozzi is very important, though, in the whole plan here. So I'm going to talk a bit about the Swiss educator Johann Heinrich Pestalozzi. Born in 1747, died in 1827. He directed institutes in Switzerland at Bergdorf and Yverdon, which included boarding schools for students and a teacher preparation program. Now, I want to make it clear that the teacher preparation program was the key part of his plan. Maybe something that McClure should have paid a bit more attention to. Okay. Pestalozzi organized his educational theory on two interrelated phases, the general and the special methods. The general method established schools that were psychologically secure learning places, places where children could be at ease, places where children could be free from fear, places where children could be happy. It was a child-centered place. That was what I call the general method. The special method was Pestalozzi's belief that ideas originate in sense perceptions out there. That mural would say, in here. Pestalozzi, out there, then in here. They would say, in here, then out there. That's the big conflict that you find between the classicalists and people like McClure and Owen. He believed that ideas originate in sense impressions, and he had a special method in which the children stressed and used sensory learning through the use of objects. Children examined the form, the shape, the quantity, the number of objects, and then learned their names. Pestalozzi and his teaching interns led field trips into the surrounding countryside on which students collected objects and studied nature. Now, McClure would like that. He was a big field tripper himself. That's how he studied and learned geography. Geography learned by exploring the immediate vicinity began with the school, then went out into the neighborhood, then out into the countryside. Pestalozzi had these guidelines for object teaching. Start with the concrete object. That was in the child's immediate experience. Begin with something that was easy before going to something that was difficult. Begin with something that was near and close at hand before going to something that was far. Teachers move slowly and gradually. Don't hurry them. Don't force them. Don't prod them. Now, this object lesson was broken down into form, number, and name objects. Every object had a name. Okay, thanks, Laura. That the students, got the right page? Yeah. Okay. Then the students would trace the outline or sketch the object. In the number lessons, they began with the concrete objects such as marbles or peas, arranging them with groups of 1, 2, 3, 4, then substituting dots for those objects, and then number signs. So you see how this Pestalozzian method progresses. In names, names were said slowly and broken into simple parts. Okay, that's the Pestalozzian method. That's what they were supposed to be doing at New Harmony. Neef, Fratasia, the Erasmo were supposed to be the word Pestalozzians, and Maclure was very attracted to the method and thought it was the method that was suited for the United States of America. Pestalozzi prepared teachers who diffused his method throughout Europe and America. In the United States, as we know, it was introduced by William Maclure and Joseph Neef. His portrait is in the next room. If you haven't seen it, Joseph Neef, very stern-looking man. It was publicized in the United States by Henry Barnard and implemented by Edward A. Sheldon at the Normal School in Oswego, New York. Okay, I'm going to introduce these two figures now. Henry Barnard was the first U.S. Commissioner of Education. He was superintendent of schools originally in Connecticut. Edward A. Sheldon was at the Normal School in Oswego. In the standard books on the history of education, these will be identified as the American Pestalozzianism advocates, not Maclure and not Neef. Why? Don't you want to know why? Yes. Okay. So Maclure visited Pestalozzi in Switzerland several times. So did Robert Owen. They both visited Pestalozzi. And Maclure was trying to get him to come to the United States, trying to persuade him to come to the United States. He felt he was too old and reluctant. He turned it down. So what Maclure did is he found a teacher that had been trained by Pestalozzi, from France, Alsace-Lorraine, Joseph Neef, 1770 to 1854, who became a resident of New Harmony, and his portraits hanging in the library. Neef was to introduce Pestalozzian education under the support of Maclure in the United States. He established a school near Philadelphia in 1806, and he wrote a sketch of a plan and method of education in 1808. In 1824, as we all know, Maclure joined Robert Owen, the British utopian socialists, in the experiment in communal living here at New Harmony. Maclure hoped, now as I went through his three elements, to develop New Harmony into an important center for scientific research and publication for Pestalozzian education. Along with Neef, Maclure brought other Pestalozzian teachers to New Harmony. Marie Duclos-Fratasia, very important woman in the history of this community, and Jacopo di Arusmo, William, I think, Roosevelt. So generally, the schools, especially Neef, stress the Pestalozzian object method, learning through sensory investigation and field trips. Important. Why isn't that found more in the history of American education? Go back. Henry Barnard, 1811 to 1900, the common school leader, promoted Pestalozzian pedagogy. He was the U.S. Commissioner of Education. He edited the American Journal of Education. He published Pestalozzianism in 1862. Very good, very competent scholar, but he gets the attention. The other man who got the attention in the histories of education was Edward A. Sheldon, 1823 to 1897, the superintendent of the Oswego Normal School in New York. He introduced Pestalozzian methods into American elementary education. He made the object lesson the focus of Oswego's teacher education program. He employed Herman Crucy Jr., the son of one of Pestalozzian's teacher's assistants, to come to Oswego. The Sheldon approach was that now the normal school was a teacher training school. It's a 2-year institution. As public schools developed, now you have to trace this in each state, but the northern states tended to follow the Massachusetts-Connecticut pattern. As they developed, they needed teachers. Normal schools were established. Sheldon had a fit-in program already ready for the normal schools, and it became standard. Pestalozzian methods were supported by teachers around the country. In 1865, the National Teachers Association endorsed object lesson. Okay, so in the general narratives of the history of American education, the New England approach to Pestalozzi, especially Barnard and Sheldon's, gained primacy over McClure's and Neef's work at New Harmony. I wrote a book on Pestalozzi, and I came to my interest in Neef. He was mentioned in a footnote. And that brought me to New Harmony. A footnote brought me to New Harmony. What I had learned about Pestalozzi was the Sheldon approach, what's the other guy's name? Sheldon approach. Okay, why did this happen? Okay, this is probably due to the tendency of historians of American education to emphasize the New England origins. The common school movement led by Barnard and Horace Mann involved the creation of normal schools for teacher preparation. Sheldon's Pestalozzian teaching method fitted very closely, nicely into the normal school curriculum. Thus, the New England narrative gained historical dominance, pushing the Indiana McClure attempt to introduce Pestalozzianism to the periphery. So that's my general historical context. Now I'm going to talk about myself and get a little bit autobiographical. As I told you, I did not come with Owen-Maclure on the Boat of Knowledge. My participation came later. Slowly, not always deliberate, the journal of becoming an educational historian. So I see the subject of I did a biography of Joseph Neef, and I envision him, still today, walking through the streets of New Harmony, which became a place that would deter me, challenge me as a historian, and bring me back at age 90. Thanks to the sponsors here. My biography, Joseph Neef, The Americanization of Pestalozzianism, was published in 1978 by the University of Alabama Press. I had written a biography, a short one, of Pestalozzi, but my biography of Neef raised different problems than I had encountered before. Neef was trained as a teacher by Pestalozzi at Bergdorf. When I did my book on Pestalozzi, I found an abundance of sources. Books by Pestalozzi, articles by him, copious literature, no problem to find sources. My challenge in writing about Pestalozzi was to analyze and distill the essential phases in his method so I could get a theory out. Neef, very, very different. The primary sources on Neef were very limited. The secondary literature very brief and repetitive. There was about 4 or 5 short articles come out about Neef every 20 years, but they repeated each other. So you read one, you read them all. So rather than distilling the elements of Neef's life and theory of education, I had to find them in the documents and archival collections and in the brief comments made by his associates. Neef wrote 3 books: A Sketch of a Plan and Method of Education, 1808, The Logic of Condillac as an illustration of his plan, in 1809, and The Method of Illustrating Children Rationally in the Arts of Writing and Reading, in 1813. So I had those, learned about his theory, how he thought teaching should take place. He was a faithful disciple of Pestalozzi. He saw sensation as the source of knowledge. He rejected excessive verbalism, authoritarianism, and corporal punishment. He was a permissive teacher, seeking to be a friend and guide to his students. While both Neef and Pestalozzi endorsed Enlightenment principles in their educational theory, Neef elided his theory with the American institutions and Republican processes of his adopted country, the United States. Although Neef's 3 books provided insights about his theory and method, they told me very little about his life, his career, and training, all the things that you need for a biography. So I had these limited sources on Neef. That footnote stirred me to do more research. I went to 2 archives, the Illinois Historical Survey at the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana, and the Working Men's Library and Museum in New Harmony, Indiana. I had spent a decade as an undergraduate and graduate student at the University of Illinois from 1953 to 1963. So I started my research at the Illinois Historical Survey. Surprisingly, the Illinois Historical Survey included the Arthur E. Bester Jr. papers, which are some of the records of the New Harmony community. I think they originally were, they still are here, but they were photographed and brought to Champaign-Urbana. And some materials from Robert Owen's community at New Lanark in Scotland. So I read Bester was one of my professors. One of our problems in his historical methods class was to determine who owed more money, who had greater indebtedness, Robert Owen or Owen-Maclure. So that was our problem. I don't know if I ever solved it. Bester wrote Backwoods Utopia, the sectarian and Owenite phases of communitarian socialism in America. Really a great book. Got me started. His chapters on Robert Owen's new view of society presented some very interesting perspectives on Owen. Bester says it's through biography, not logic, that you have to approach Owenism. Bester called Owen more an enlightened manager than a social theorist. He said that Owen's new view of society included opposition to private property, commercial competition, and inequality of rank or condition. What Owen brought to America in 1824, Bester wrote, was a communitarian plan for social reorganization based on small experimental self-governing communities. So his work was invaluable to get me started. In fact, when I applied for a grant to do research at New Harmony, Bester wrote a supporting letter, which I think helped me, and I got a National Humanities grant that brought me to New Harmony for, well, the second time. I visited once as a tourist with my wife, but that brought me to the Working Man's Institute at New Harmony, which has the most extensive collection of Robert Owen, William-Maclure, Joseph Neave, and others associated with the community. However, I discovered something, that navigating a local archive is a bit different than I've been through presidential libraries and archives, university ones, but this is my first time in a local archive. This is a unique place here. Very important. Now, how do you navigate through a place like this? So I had to do it carefully because the archivists were careful about me. But I'll tell you more about that in a minute. So I come to New Harmony. I wrote the first part of the book on Neefe's life, military career, and so forth. I began my biography of Neefe with this quote: "At the south edge of New Harmony, Indiana, in Maple Hill Cemetery, over the grave of Joseph Neefe, there is the monument erected by his daughter, Mrs. Richard Owen, which bears the inscription, quote, Joseph Neefe was the coadjutor of Pestalozzi in Switzerland and was the first to promulgate the Pestalozzian method in America." So mirroring that epitaph that in stone, educational historians have interpreted Neefe as the lengthened shadow of Pestalozzi in America. Now that concept, person as a shadow, intrigued me. What does that mean? Person as a shadow. The person as a shadow of a more important person is an intriguing one, especially for the educational biographer. I imagine for you, imagine for everyone. I ask myself, does a shadow mean that the person is less than a disciple or implementer of another's, usually a major figure's ideas and theory? What does less than more than mean? Less than more than calibrated my assessment as a biographer's assessment of my subject's significance. I continued, I was young then, I didn't know what to do. I was length and shadow, new archive to go through. I continued with the standard interpretation of Neefe as the shadow of Pestalozzi, but I reinterpreted him with the word Americanization in my book's title. I wrote that Neefe was more than the length and shadow of Pestalozzi in America, more than a mere imitator. He contributed to the Americanization of Pestalozzian education. Neefe's rationalism was clearly evident in the ethical dimension of education, where it overshadowed Pestalozzi's paternalism and romantic sentimentality. Neefe's ethical system was derived from humanist and secular values rather than religious orthodoxy. Now, as tended to do, Neefe's work and McClure's work and all their work is on the American frontier. The frontier is a dynamic force in American history. It reshapes, it changes. And so what happened with Neefe and McClure was part of the transformation of the McClure. Now, when I did my biography of Neefe, as I told you about Sheldon and the New England dominance, Neefe was regarded as a peripheral figure. He probably still is, even though I wrote a biography. More at the margins of the history of American education. At a conference of the Midwest History of Education Society, older, prominent, and respected senior professor came up to me and said, I want to give you some advice, Gerald. If you want to advance your career, concentrate on major topics. Don't waste your time on obscure figures like Neef. Whoa. Although his advice was well-intentioned, he was not my major advisor, but it was I didn't take it. In my mind, a neglected person has a story to be told. And much history is the collective stories of neglected persons. As I worked through Neef, I became aware that a large part of his place in education came from associations. To study a person like Neef, you have to study who he was associated with. And I think that's true of most of the characters at New Harmony. To find out I don't know about the two big guys, but all the others, to find out about them, you have to know who they were associated with. It's history and meaning by who you're associated with. So in writing about Neef, I devised this term called a circle of association. I found it useful. A circle of association is composed of multiple persons. Sometimes this involves doing multiple biography sketches and nuancing these. So to do Neef's biography, I had to discover his relationships with other individuals. The association that brought Neef to the United States was his relationship with McClure. Anticipating the land-grant college by a half-century, McClure developed a plan to establish practical, skill-based agricultural and industrial schools using the Pestalozzian method. My research on Neef became more complicated as his circle of association grew at New Harmony. And now I had to consider Robert Owen, the British communitarian, and in addition to William McClure. So I had to position him in the lives and ideas of two major figures, Owen and McClure. Is that two? Okay. And then there were some supporting actors. Say, Truce, Lesueur, D'Arrosmont, and Fratasia. All worthy of their own biographies, but we would say in the mainstream, kind of peripheral, aren't they? Together, a bit more important. There's Thomas Say, the pioneer American natural socialist. His books, American Etymology and American Conchology, were published by the school press here. Charles Lesueur, a French zoologist and illustrator, whose drawings were also published by the school press. Another one. Okay. That I don't need. Okay, then I want to turn to another concept, place. Every time I come here, I know I'm in a special place. This town is unlike many other towns, right? It is draws me here. It draws me here. So, in writing about New Harmony, and I hope somebody will do it more in the future, there are places, geographical centers, that attract notable individuals in certain ways and fields. These locations have what I call character of place. Character of place. This place has it. Now, we all know, for example, Concord, Massachusetts. There's just another series out on Thoreau. Concord, Massachusetts. Emerson, Thoreau. The Alcotts, the Transcendentalists, a famous American place. And then there's Greenwich Village, the home of the modernist avant-garde artists, writers, and poets. In the first half of the 19th century, New Harmony exhibited character of place. For those who know it and love it, it still has character of place. The important thing for us to do is to make it like the Concord of the Middle West or the Concord of America, a very special place for all. So New Harmony exhibit a character of place due to the scientists and educators gathered here. For the biography, these places need to be described. In researching my book on Neef, my realization of the importance of place in writing education biography came to me in a circuitous, complicated, but vividly inescapable way. I learned about place by living in the town where Neef lived and worked. My wife and I spent several weeks here, almost a month. In an apartment above, there was a drugstore, and we lived up by that, and I would come to the Working Man's Institute to do my research. While the time and chronology of Neef's life and events were vital, necessary aspects in his life story, the place where he lived, and the educational spaces in which he taught framed his life story. As a historian of American education, I found that McClure's Pestalozzian endeavors had been understudied and overlooked in the general histories of American education. Historians had concentrated on the introduction that occurred in the northeastern United States. My association with New Harmony developed over time. Originally, my wife, Patricia, and I came as tourists. We were interested in visiting a historic site. Historic New Harmony, of course, was the restoration of the harmonist religious community and Owen's experiment and in communal living. Pat and I wrote a historical travel book, Experiencing America's Past, which included a commentary on New Harmony. We began, quote, the first historical community site we ever visited was New Harmony, Indiana in 1966. Enchanted by the tiny historic town, we entered that summer evening at dusk. We had paid 25 cents to cross the toll bridge over the Wabash River. A quarter to enter Utopia. A quarter to enter Utopia. Our finest investments, at 25 cents, opened a world filled with fascinating communal groups, historic villages, and outdoor museums. My first view of New Harmony was direct. An historic town, solidly constructed buildings, many in Germanic style. From Illinois, I mentally contrasted New Harmony with the crude log cabins in Abraham Lincoln's New Salem village. In contrast with New Salem's rugged simplicity, New Harmony's complexity, which I came to appreciate slowly as I stayed several weeks into town. Since my purpose here was to write a biography of Neef, I spent many hours here at the Working Man's Institute, the repository of the New Harmony archives. Unlike the extensive catalogs of sources at presidential archives and university archives, the arrangement and organization of a small local library was less formal, but I discovered guardians. They were careful about who's going to use these documents. As the guardian of the town's heritage, the librarian archivist needed to be assured that the researcher's intentions were honorable and reflected a reverence for its documents. This was not going to be, let the professor steal some of these documents for his own use. We got to watch this guy. So the first day, I only got a few documents at my table, very few. Then the next day, I got a few more. Then the next day, more and more. And then the archivist even started to discuss them with me. She was very helpful. When I entered and left the Working Man's Institute, I would pass by the large portrait of my subject, Joseph Neef. He's still up there. His features are still strong, telling me, you better do this right or don't do it at all. On my breaks from researching the manuscripts that I would, in the archives, I would walk the streets lined with golden rain trees. I passed by the McClure Owen Mansion, David Dale Owen's Geological Laboratory, and the roofless church. Two buildings, dormitory number 2 and Neef's house, were physical reminders of my presence, of my subject's presence at New Harmony. I visited number 2, which had been a residence for single men in the Harmonist period, and then was the location of Neef's Pestalozzian school during the Owen period. And I used my imagination entertaining a movie-like scene of Neef using the objects and teaching New Harmony's children. The closest I came to making a movie was filming a video on Pestalozzian education in dormitory number 2 for a series produced by a professor at Northern Illinois University. Then I'm jumping ahead now. In the 1970s, a group of like-minded individuals interested in intentional communities organized the Communal Studies Association. Spearheading the association, shepherding its early years, and really securing its existence was Donald Pitzer, a professor of history at Southern Illinois University. He was largely its creator and leader. Unlike most learned societies whose members were professors in an academic discipline, the associations were more diverse. Curators and docents of restorations, residents of contemporary communitarian towns, artists and writers inspired. My wife, Patricia, and I, who had savored from our first experience at New Harmony, joined this group and became consistent members at its conferences, meeting in the United States and in Europe. We wrote a book, Pat and I did, Visiting Utopian Communities, a guide to the Shakers, Moravians, and others, published by the University of South Carolina Press. We introduced our book saying, in the 19th century, a number of communities were organized by Americans who believed they could create perfect places in which to live, utopias. Some were utopian idealists who thought they could actually create heaven on earth. Others were members of religious societies who wished to create sacred cities of holy people who would, with eager anticipation, await the second coming of Jesus Christ. New Harmony was the place of two communal groups, George Rapp's Harmony Society and Robert Owen's Community of Equality. I'd like to conclude now by placing what was supposed to be my subject, the New Harmony Boatload of Knowledge, into a perspective. McClure's Boatload of Knowledge was anticipatory of important developments that would happen later in American history of education. It anticipated the land-grant industrial and agricultural colleges and universities of the More Real Act. McClure had a definite role in American history of education in that he sought to introduce Pestalozzian education to the United States. Although the object teachings of the Oswego Normal School had been the dominant interpretation in American educational history, McClure's approach was more genuine and practicable and related to the real Pestalozzian movement. The school was brought into society and into nature, and nature and the community was brought into the school. The school was not to be isolated, but was to be a place in which useful knowledge would be taught. The students would work with actual activities, making and doing things. This became a seedbed of American progressive education. McClure also anticipated the concept of philanthropy in American education. That is, wealthy people should use their wealth for useful purposes, especially educational one, which anticipated much of what was to be done later by Andrew Carnegie and those who followed him. Thus, the Boatload of Knowledge anticipated many of the major developments in American education in the 19th century. Okay. Thank you. Okay, are we going to do some questions or comments? Let's see. Yeah. Shay?
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for your presentation. It's wonderful. Is there room or a place for Pestalozzian education today?
I think there's always room for Pestalozzian education at any time and place. I think now we're caught up in a period in the schools that we discussed this, of testing. And the reason, the stated purpose of testing is to make sure that no child is left behind. But many children are being left behind because of testing. It's ironic, isn't it? Really ironic. I think there's room for Pestalozzian education at any time because it does mirror how I've observed children learning. Touching things, doing things, exploring things, drawing things. And it's so natural to move from that doing that occurs into the more formal school. So I think there's room for it today. There's room for a lot of other things, but I think there's kind of a core learning by doing something with things around me. Okay, I'll try to answer that. Okay. Yes.
So Neef was Richard Owen's father-in-law, correct?
Pardon?
Neef was Richard Owen's father-in-law, and
Yes.
Richard was Robert Owen's son.
Yes.
And Richard was honored at Purdue and Indiana University both, correct?
Yes.
So was he influenced directly by his father-in-law to go into education and different endeavors?
That I don't know. I think probably this circle of association that I mentioned influenced him. Probably influenced by McClure, probably by Robert Owen, and certainly by the association with people who valued education. So I think that is where, in a place like New Harmony, the circle of association, it's hard to say this one was influenced, but it's a group of people that are sort of like-minded that influence each other. So I would say, yes, he was, but through larger associations. Yeah.
I was intrigued to learn that Abraham Lincoln, when he was 17 or 18, saw the boatload of knowledge pass by the river. Can you tell me more about that?
About Abraham Lincoln, see?
How the boat passed him, like.
I really can't. I don't know. It'd make a good narrative, though, if I could. Okay. I suppose that Lincoln's background and schooling was so limited. If he saw this and if he understood it, it must have caused great wonderment from where he came from, who raised him. He learned to be a farmer. A dirt farmer is what he was supposed to be. But he wasn't satisfied with that. Nothing against agriculture. Yes, ma'am.
So can you relate Pestalozzian education, Montessori education, and Waldorf education? We still have Montessori
You do, yeah.
among the youngest students, but
Yeah, I can. I can relate Montessori education a bit to Pestalozzi. they're both child-centered. And when I say child-centered, that means what happens in learning in a school or anywhere is with the learner, the child. They're both child-centered. Is there another thing? Yes. There's my paper, people. Your task is to study that paper and memorize it and report on it and learn from it. That's not child-centered. It's not even people-centered, right? So, they're both childs that begin with the child, but their ideas about what a child is are somewhat different. Pestalozzi, a child is a living natural being who lives through the senses. Touching this, playing with this, tearing up the space, lives through the senses. Montessori, in each child there is a spirit, a spark of the divine. God is there. And children's activities guide it. See, in a Montessori school, there are things you can play with and deal with, but they're selected. Making a mud pie might not be one of the selected materials. Lining up cubes, maybe. So she kind of structures what they're going to learn. They choose it, but it's something that is part of a structure. Waldorf, I don't know that much about to venture, but there are similarities certainly between the two. Both Montessori and Pestalozzi, there's something that we call the traditional school. Maybe you've been there. You sit in a seat. I went to Catholic school for a while, and you sit in a seat. When you're called upon, you rise and answer a question. What do you answer the question about? An assignment that has been assigned the night before. Homework. The teacher may be understanding or may not be understanding. His or her job is to get that material to you. Have you ever been in that kind of educational situation? Okay, I have. There are other kind of educational situations where you're to learn by what you want to do. That is, learning what's in your environment. So Pestalozzi, Montessori, these reformers are all doing a battle with that traditional school. Like I pointed to that mural when I started. To me, I may be wrong, but what is an educated person? An educated person knows the classics. An educated person at that time knew Greek and knew Latin. I studied Latin for quite a while, and I don't know Greek. I would be lesser than an educated person. Well, what about planting a garden? What about raising tomatoes? What about going out trying to find a job? That's not part of what a school does. Part of school is to learn the tradition, learn the history that's there. So I think McClure was fighting against that. I think if I had to find the weakness in the whole thing, it's maybe they were too early in time here. In New England, they had, with the common school movement, a lot of public schools being established. They needed teachers. But I think they should have, if I were to advise William, I think what you might do is a little more teacher education here, because that's the way your method is going to be transfused, diffused, and perpetuated. That's the way you're going to get it out in the country. And I think that was, I don't know why Madame Cortesia didn't do more. They had plenty to do here, of course, but that was what I'd say was missing.
Thank you. My name is Diane Sanders. I'm the co-chair of the Owen-Maclure 200 and also the director of Historic and Harmony. And I just want to thank you, Dr. Gerald Gutek, for being here today, as well as his wife Patricia and daughter Laura. We're really thrilled that you were all able to make it and that the weather cooperated this time for you. It's just been really great to hear about your perspective on this wonderful celebration. I did want to just mention a couple of things. Make sure you visit our website, www.owen-maclure200.com. There you'll find information about Pestalozzi, Neef, lots of other characters here in Harmony, so please make sure you check that out. You'll also find out about our upcoming events, which include our next lecture, which is going to be on Wednesday, May 20th at 6:30 here at the WMI. We'll have Bill Bartelt, who will be talking about President Abraham Lincoln and Robert Dale Owen, so please make sure to attend. And hopefully we'll have some information about his viewing of the Boatload of Knowledge. On June 11th at 6:30 at WMI, we'll have Gerald Gutek talking about Francis Wright. And then later in the month, on Saturday, June 27th, as part of the Firefly Festival, we'll have Randy Patrick talking about Thomas Say at the Athenaeum. We're still working on the time for that one. I also wanted to mention that we are going to have a July 4th drone show. So make sure you come back on the 4th. We'll have our traditional July 4th program put on by the Friends of the Working Men's Institute at Murphy Auditorium at 10 a.m. And in the evening, we'll have some live entertainment, food trucks, and a drone show. And then later that month, the next Saturday on July 11th, we are going to have Martha Rasky and Brian Fox Ellis portraying Francis Wright and Robert Owen and doing their speeches, their 4th of July speeches for us. So that's a little bit of a preview of what's coming up. I'd like to invite us all now to celebrate the Owen-Maclure 200. We've got a birthday cake. And again, thank you everyone for being here, and thank you again, Dr. Gutek.
Thank you. Thanks,
You did good. You did a good job.
Thanks. Hey. Thank you.
Yeah, you did a nice job.
I'm glad she was here to get this paper. Is there a way we can have a copy of this?